in a bit, as well as a blogger.
People to eat healthier because that's my passion.
Like you said, the foundation for lifelong friendship is incredible. In this one or that one.
To be truthfully told, how do you make something different?
Why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of your approach with your family's ethnic makeup and the diverse backgrounds that you and your husband.
Hello, welcome to Moms Changing the World. This is your host, Ekua Walker, Child Development Nurse Practitioner and CEO, Chief Encouragement Officer. Introducing the new podcast, which is the place for moms to find encouragement, hope, and inspiration, where we're supporting moms in the trenches of motherhood. You will receive practical tips and strategies to address the developmental needs of your children with a positive parenting perspective in mind. Here at Moms Changing the World, we are moms on the journey of changing the world, one child at a time, one day at a time.
Abundance. We don't have to purchase material things for.
Hello, welcome to Moms Changing the World. This is your host, Ekua Walker, Child Development Nurse Practitioner, Parent Coach, and CEO, your Chief Encouragement Officer. Moms everywhere who are raising world changers, one child at a time, one day at a time. Excited to bring you another great interview. And if you've been around here for a little while, you know that I love talking about food and healthy foods and ways to feed our growing families. And so I've featured at least, one chef or dietitian most of the seasons that I've put the show together. And I ask almost every guest about their go-to meals. And so I'm really thrilled that today we can feature a cookbook author, Nisha Melvani, and get right into how to feed our families in a real plant-based, healthful way. So before I dive into more about her, I like using a proverb as an umbrella for our conversation. And an African proverb that I came across that I really liked for today is, the forest not only hides man's enemies, but it's full of man's medicine, healing power, and food. Again, the forest not only hides man's enemies, but it's full of man's medicine, healing power, and food. And I like that because I always think about food as our first medicine. And even as a medication prescriber in clinic with children who have developmental delays or neurodiversity, I am always talking with them about the importance of the foundation of healthy eating, healthful eating to fuel our bodies and our brains in a way that is powerful and very important and can't be overlooked. And so I have always been drawn towards vegan recipes, even though I myself am not vegan, because I've always loved how much flavor and how much is infused into plant-based foods, so that they can really provide that sensory benefit, as well as be healthful and nutritious for us. So to give you a little bit more about Nisha, um, her cookbook is called Practically Vegan, and it's a beautiful cookbook that you'll definitely want to add to your library. Yes, she's showing it there with more than 100 easy, delicious vegan dinners on a budget. And so I love that it's also about economical ideas for feeding families. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist with a master's degree from Columbia University and attended culinary school at the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York City. She is the mom of 3 teenage girls, and we'll definitely pick her brain about that in a bit, as well as a blogger at Cooking for Peanuts, which you can find on Instagram and her website. Nisha, so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here.
Great. Yeah. So a fun fact about the book, it turns out that you released this book and wrote it during the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Sure.
As we're diving in.
I think it was a saving grace. Everyone was cooking during the pandemic. I think, almost everyone. and I got paid to do it. So
yeah,
after years of no income and, trying to help people to eat healthier, because that's my passion, I cooked for peanuts, meaning for nothing, and for kids. And, lo and behold, in the pandemic, I got this cookbook deal, which I didn't expect. And it was really good timing.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to experiment a lot being stuck at home, but I am a home-based mom anyway. And the second advantage is my kids were home. So I had some real testers, because teenagers are the ultimate test as to how delicious your food is.
That's right. And they are honest, brutally honest at times.
Brutally, yes. So I had official recipe testers, and then I had the teen recipe testers.
That is awesome. Good. And so, speaking of your passion around food, how did you kind of come to discover, that this was an area that you wanted to dive into?
So I think, culturally, coming from Jamaica, an island where you have so much fresh produce and so unique and different, and so many flavorful spices, the food is just hearty, delicious. I was exposed to that. I was also exposed to my spam loving mom, who gave us a lot of canned food. So I started to see this big difference between eating fresh food. And then I also got exposure to ITIL food from the Rastafarianism in Jamaica. And that I loved. I realized when I ate like that, I felt so good, because it's mostly vegan. They don't really add salt, and it still tastes good. And I felt good eating it. So I had this contrast between eating the canned food and the fresh food and all the flavors. And, I started to really appreciate the difference with home cooked natural foods.
Yeah. That's great. And there is nothing like, that home cooked meal, that home cooked as fresh as possible. And myself and my husband were fortunate enough to grow up, having it and kind of taking it for granted, where, as the generations have gone on, it's not necessarily that way, especially with the convenience of eating out and fast food and all of those things.
Yes. And I think, there's a misconception that eating healthy or vegan is more expensive than fast food. Now, sure, it can be, because there are products that are, more processed that are expensive, but there's also a way to do it on a budget, which is what inspired me to write this book too, because I feel it can be more accessible to people, so they're not put off by all those expensive products that they think they need to be vegan.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really important. And I think anybody and everybody can appreciate the like I was mentioning earlier, the infusing of incredible flavors into vegetables. And I think I remember growing up, I was, fortunate enough that we had a balance of the kind of home cooked Ghanaian foods from our African tradition. But then my mom also was great at putting together some of the American, standards, and the Italian, and just the common everyday foods that were a part of, the culture around us growing up in California. And so I like that anybody and everybody can put different foods together, put different spices together, and almost travel the world, right? When it comes to food.
And Ekua, I spent many years in England in boarding school. My parents sent me off at 7. And the food there was terrible. And, we were given a lot of vegetables, but they were not seasoned well. They were mushy. And so that also inspired me to create delicious vegetables, because sure, that would put anyone off vegetables for life.
Right. Right. And then a lot of our kids, like you said, feel like, oh, I don't like vegetables. And it's often, for that reason, that it's not, maybe handled or cooked as flavorfully or as sensitively as it could be, or it's overcooked. Right. And then some of the nutritional benefit is kind of cooked away as well. And then our food supply too, has changed over, the decades as well. And so I wish that, I always sense it when I visit, other countries, or when I'm in Ghana and I eat like a pineapple, or I eat something like a mango, and I just or even as simple as a banana. And I'm like, oh my goodness, right? Of course, there's the
It's so
difference of,
different. Yeah.
the territory that I'm in, but it's just alive in ways that sometimes, I think are, the kind of the society of food that we have access to
Yes.
doesn't necessarily come to life in that way.
It's so true. The different countries, the fruit tastes very different. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm also of Indian descent, so we go to India quite a bit with the kids, and the mangoes there are just unbelievably good.
I know. Oh my goodness. See, mouth is watering already.
Yes.
So,
A good mango lassi.
That's right. That's right. Good, good. So then is, motherhood what you thought it would be as you were kind of discovering and putting together your passion around food?
I think I didn't think too much about motherhood before I became a mother. I kind of just like went into it eyes closed and just I knew I wanted a lot of kids. I used to say I wanted 6 when I was younger. I think because I wasn't raised with my siblings or as a family so much. We were all in different schools. And I had this dream of like The Sound of Music where,
no wonder we get along so well.
Yeah.
I love that musical as well.
Yeah. So we would be the Indian Jamaican Von Trapp family or something.
Right. Yeah.
I wanted like this big household of just lots of energy. And, I think we do have that in a way. It's definitely, I wanted kids to be close in age. So I had 3 and 3.5 years, which
oh, wow.
kind of crazy.
Kudos to you.
But I wanted them to be friends or, because I wasn't close to my siblings in, being raised. So I definitely think that did come true for me. But what I didn't think about is when they are close in age, there's a lot of like quibbles too. There's a lot of fighting. So I got both sides of the coin there.
Right. But yeah, siblings, developmentally, siblings are that testing ground, right, for relationships and for conflict resolution and problem solving. And so, but it can be, like you said, the foundation for lifelong friendship is incredible.
Yes. And it's 3 girls. So they really, it's like, 3 sisters who get along. Definitely, I do see like a difference in the middle child. Like, you always get told that. And my husband's a middle child, my sister, and I definitely see traits. I was talking about it to my husband yesterday. There are similar traits with the 3 of them.
Sure. Yeah. And there's oldest child patterns and youngest child patterns as well, being an oldest child myself. So yeah,
Me too.
I find all of
I'm
that.
an oldest child.
Yes. I find all of that very, very fascinating and super fun. Good. All right. So then if we, move into kind of talking about food and preparing food, whether, you're vegan or not, I think just the preparation process can sometimes, feel overwhelming, especially think back at the pandemic when it was constant and it was even just grocery shopping was a challenge and everything was just different. And now, we're thankfully settling into more of the kind of the usual patterns and routines, but, preparing a good meal and good plant-based meal starts, long before you're in the kitchen. And so how, where do you get started or what advice do you have for kind of beginning that process?
So interestingly, writing this book in COVID where food supply was affected, and people were like hoarding food. So, I actually had to be very practical writing the book and think about what is available easily, because even in that time, things weren't that available easily. Luckily, I was not writing a baking book because that would have been terrible. There wasn't even flour out there.
That's right. It's a memory now, but yes.
Yeah. So I think the food supply is still somewhat affected. And I think this book that I wrote really embraces that limited supply and that you use. And for me, the way I cook and have learned to cook with 3 kids, I'm very practical because it's expensive otherwise. And I don't have that much time when you think about all the other things you're doing. So I have a set amount of spices and condiments that I use over and over again in different ways for all my meals. And then I think when I go to the grocery store about buying vegetables and fruit, and what kind of protein, like beans, legumes, tofu, tempeh, what protein will I use, and what carbohydrates will I get? You know, whole grain, rice, pasta. And you don't always have to go for whole grain, because if you have children who will eat white pasta, but they don't eat a lot of vegetables, and you want to incorporate more vegetables into their, you know, diet, you can use a vehicle that they already like white pasta, and then add the vegetables to that. I don't believe you should hide them, like, you know, some say, because you want them to embrace them, and it may take a few tries, but they trust your kids, they will get there if you keep trying. But, you know, I think having this certain set of spices, aromatics, your onion, ginger, and garlic, and these set of condiments, and using them repeatedly, you're saving money. And it's not as intimidating, because you learn just different ways of using them, as long as you just buy whatever produce is on sale or what looks extra fresh. My recipes are very flexible, and my food at home, it's like I can adapt it based on what's available. You just aim for your 3 macronutrients, you know, get your starches, your good fat, and your protein.
Yes, you open the book with some really great information around, you know, those areas, you know, how to find, you know, the different proteins, and you spend some good time talking about like beans and how to prepare them. And so it's a great, you know, great tool for learning and considering, right, how to make it as easy as possible by buying in bulk, is one of the tips you share in there, and, you know, having it some of those basics on hand. And I can share, you know, the one of the recipes that I tried in the cookbook, and, you know, you can share some of your favorites next too, was the creamy lentil and corn chili. Because I have lentils in our, I have lentils in our pantry all the time, and all the other ingredients, you know, were available as well. And so for, you know, those who might, you know, be interested, it was only, you know, I think 3/4 cup of the brown or green lentils. I actually ended up using, I think, red lentils. It was, like you said, flexible. And you chop your aromatics, as you mentioned, and an onion, some garlic, jalapeno if you like, you know, the heat. I tend to use like a red pepper, because our family doesn't do as much with spice. But I had the can of tomatoes, and you really just, you know, kind of soften all the aromatics, and then you throw in your spices. So chili powder, smoked paprika, chipotle powder, again, if you wanted more of the heat, ground mustard seed. I had mustard powder, ground mustard powder that I just sprinkled in there instead, since I didn't have the seeds, tomato paste. And then I always have frozen corn, and I think Trader Joe's has a fire, you know, grilled corn or something. So it just has that little bit of that kind of smoky essence to it. So, you know, you throw that in there. And you know, I think in less than 30 minutes, you know, it was all cooked up and ready to go. And then you kind of top it off with some fresh cilantro or parsley if you have that, ground black pepper, salt, and to your taste, and lime juice. So it was delicious. And again, since our family eats, you know, pretty much everything, I also had some of, I think, like ground turkey or something that I had, you know, that you could either have on the side or as a supplement. But all of these great flavors, you know, kind of brought that together, especially, you know, the next day and the next day, right, with the leftovers.
Yes, I eat a lot of leftovers. Now my husband started taking them for lunch, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's my lunch.
That's funny. Yeah.
But that's what I think it's important, like you just said, to have, they do give a lot of flexibility. If you don't have all those spices, it still works. The recipe works. You just stick to the quantities of, you know, lentils or vegetables in cups. That's why I like to give it in cups, so people can just substitute. And I think growing up with so many different cultures and in so many places, I sort of don't have boundaries anymore about which spices you need to stick to in various cuisines, because I think so many offer so many wonderful flavors, and they can be mixed and matched. You don't have to be limited by that. You know, all those delicious Mexican spices, they taste good in so many different things, and burgers and patties, things you wouldn't think to use them in, soups, you know?
Yeah. Awesome. Good. So then what are your go-to recipes, you know, from the book that your family, you know, really loves, or that you find, you know, every week we're using this one or that one?
So truth be told, I make something different. And this sounds kind of crazy, but it's because this method is so easy. I make something different every night since I started the Instagram. Isn't that like, and it may not be hugely different because they're all based on the same thing, but there are variations depending on what I have, because once you follow this sort of strategy, you can make anything and you become creative. And I wasn't born a chef or a good cook. I learned by practice. And I think that's what's important, is to have faith in yourself, and you can do it. You will become very good by practicing. But I will say, one of, it's hard, it's like choosing your favorite child, your favorite recipe. But a couple that I do really like, well, I love the potato tofu fritters burgers, because it sort of reminds me of tikkis, the Indian like potato tikkis we ate growing up, but I've made it healthy by adding tofu for good fat and protein. And they, it tastes really good with the tofu, and you can also bake them as opposed to deep fry them. And so that is one of my favorites. And I like burgers and fritters because you don't have to serve them as sandwiches or as burgers. You can put them in a veggie bowl, roast some veggies, put the patties in there, add some greens. It's very flexible.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Kind of idea of a bowl, kind of a meal as well, because then, yes, everybody can kind of put it together the way they like. So for us, we do our Taco Tuesday, right? And so everybody can, if you want to have like the quesadilla version of the meal, you can put it together that way. Or I do the bowl with some greens at the bottom and then layer on everything else. So,
and I think bowl style is great for kids, because you can lay out those different parts for it to build a bowl and give them the control to build it themselves. And as long as you present all those healthful options, they may not take every one, but presenting it, presenting it, and they see it more and they become familiar seeing it, they're more likely to start trying it. And you at least know you're offering a variety of healthy ingredients, and doesn't have to be too many. And they get to build their own bowl, which makes them feel empowered over their diet.
Right. And, you as the chef, or, maybe it's, as the parents together are putting, you're choosing the what, right. And the how it's prepared, and you can get them in the kitchen. I've been having my little one in the kitchen with me this week, and I've been mixing everything up and helping with even some of the chopping. And it's so much fun to do it together. But you're kind of deciding the what and the when, like the meal layout for the week. And then the kids then also get to decide, right, how much, and like you said, which items, right? And like you said, they have to learn and practice having that sense of control. They're more likely to eat what they themselves are putting together.
Right. You should enjoy the cooking with your kids while they're young, because when they're teenagers, homework takes over and like friends take over. And I feel sad that we kind of lost that in COVID. My 13-year-old then at the time made full meals for us. Like, she is so good in the kitchen, she kind of has that thing. And we would say we're so overwhelmed, and she had more free time, so she would go in, and the same method, she would just look what there was and create food for the family.
That's incredible. Yes, inviting them early and often is.
I think I put her off cooking though. That's the only thing. It was too much work in the end. She's like, wait a minute, this is hard.
Right. But then, like you said, the more they do it, the easier it gets. And I am seeing that tween, my older one's a tween. And so I am seeing that shift where it takes a little bit more to get her. But, we're trying to incorporate it, right, as part of, the expectation, right? Everybody's pitching in somehow, and then you can put a meal together, for the week. So what would you like to do as your, kind of contribution for the week? So you can set up kind of a system where that's part of, their expectation or their chore or their blessing. I try to call them blessings. The way you're blessing the family this week.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to use that. That's lovely. I think I did make this mistake. So as a mom, I will tell you, I'm overly nurturing because my mom just never did those things. She was nurturing in other ways. And so I found I did way too much for them in terms of cutting food and, just helping in the kitchen. I did most of the cleaning up, and I feel it was a disservice to them. because now my eldest is going to college and she's going to have to learn to do all these things because, you know, she does other stuff. She doesn't not contribute, but I think if you have young kids, start young.
Right. And then make it, you know, make it fun. Like you can, so it's pretty easy when they're young to make it a game or a competition or to, you know, add imagination. And we talk about this in a previous episode with Sarah Nikerak, you know, our perspective, you know, our approach and play infused in all of this is super helpful. And that's episode 44 if you want to listen back. And speaking of which, she also had a great memory hack for teaching us the top 10, you know, brain foods. And so definitely listen back to have a way to remember and work with your kids. I taught it to my kids and they know, you know, what the top 10 brain foods are as well because of that. And so, you know, as we're, moving forward, when it comes to, you know, snacks and other quick kind of put togethers, what are some of the, you know, things that you like to do for that?
So I have found that, you know, while you're the parent and they're in the house, you get to choose a variety of snacks and then they can choose how much or what they eat of it. But I think it's important to put healthy options in the home because they're going to be exposed to so many unhealthy options in the world, right?
Everywhere else.
That they can try there. And what I did learn is if you make it available, like, okay, so again, it's probably over nurturing, but when they're coming home from school, I know they're tired and hungry. And so instead of letting them then go and raid the chips or whatever it is, the healthy chips or cereal, they love cereal. What I do is I cut a bunch of different fruit and I just lay it all out and some almonds, you know, nuts, to balance that. And I just lay it all out on the kitchen counter, which you can see behind me. And so once they walk in, that's what they're going to see. So when they're starving, they'll eat a lot more than you give them credit. Like they'll almost eat anything because they're so hungry. And, you know, most kids love fruit. So that's what I started doing a little while back. And they are used to it now and they eat it, you know, and I think that's a good opportunity to present them with healthy options because they're hungry. So that's a mainstay snack. And then I keep around, you know, obviously not everything is super 100%, you know, healthy in the sense that it's packaged. They might have some like low sodium I always look for. So and the fewer ingredients, the better. But they might have some chips like corn chips or popcorn. We do have fresh popcorn, but sometimes they're lazy and they don't want to make it. And, you know, and some like just healthy bars, just, you know, as a backup. But that's not your mainstay. That's not what you go to, but it's there when, you know, you want to treat sometimes. Or
Sure. I also saw in the cookbook that you have a mug cake for like a kind of a cornbread mug cake, I think it is. Yeah. How did you come up with that one?
Mug cakes are kind of all the rage in COVID at some point, you know, it's an easy form of baking. I love cornbread so much, but sometimes you don't want to make a whole, you know, loaf of cornbread because they may not eat it, or the lack of ingredients at the time, you know, the supply. I was like, well, why can't I just have one? Like for myself, or if someone else doesn't like it, I make it for myself. So I was like, oh, I'll make it into a mug cake. And I hadn't seen a cornbread mug cake before. So I tested it and it worked and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, this is great because, you know, a kid can make this. You microwave it. It's so easy. It's like, just mix it and microwave it. So I think that's a good snack for them. If you have those sort of ingredients, it's healthy. You know, not too much sugar or sweetener. You need very little, and they learn how to do those mug cakes. My kids were making mug cakes throughout COVID.
I do remember that it was kind of that quick and easy, portion controlled way to get in some things. So yeah, I cannot wait to try that recipe. And then another interesting one that I'm looking forward to is miso eggplant steaks with spicy peanut noodles. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
So it's funny you bring that one up, because what's been so lovely about the book being released is I'm getting photos from people who have made the recipes.
Right.
And it's like so heartwarming for me, like it's really in the world. And that was one of the recipes someone shared that they made yesterday, and it looked so beautiful.
Yeah.
So I think like what inspired that is I believe food should look beautiful because you eat with your eyes first.
Right.
And I know cutting the eggplant, your audience may not be able to see it, but cutting the eggplant in that manner where it sort of looks like a steak.
Yeah, the long lengthwise in half.
Right. And doing the crosshatch pattern on top. It sort of appeals to people who do eat meat because it looks steak-like, right? And it is, eggplants are meaty, that sort of texture.
Yeah,
but I love
if you know how to
miso.
cook it right.
Yes, exactly. And I think people get put off by eggplant, but this is such an easy recipe. And the miso adds so much flavor, and it's so easy to add flavor with miso. And it adds that umami, that meaty quality. So you don't miss the meat. So that's sort of how that got inspired.
Nice. And then tell us a little bit about Jackfruit. This teriyaki pulled jackfruit sandwich looks amazing. And jackfruit is often used as a meat substitute.
It is. And I think, when you think of fresh jackfruit, it's so intimidating, right? It's so big. They're so big.
Yes.
And cutting them up is hard. So, again, I think it's important that people don't give themselves a hard time from using frozen vegetables or canned foods, because you should just do what you need to do to get a home cooked meal on the table. And it's okay. And so same with jackfruit, you don't need to go cut the jackfruit. I don't often. So the canned versions are very good. I do tend to rinse it for the extra sodium before I use it to reduce the sodium. And, it's very easy to prepare, and it absorbs flavors so easily from marinades or sauces. And the texture is great, very meaty again. And it is like a kind of pulled pork. So, because, meat eaters enjoy that kind of texture, you want to appeal to that as well. So they don't feel like, oh, it's so foreign to them. So that's why jackfruit is so popular. It's easy to work with and readily available in the cans.
Yeah, that's great. I think I've tried it once or twice, and I have been very impressed or surprised at how, meat-like it is.
I did have a jackfruit biryani once, the Indian rice dish, and it was amazing. It was so good.
Yeah, that does sound delicious.
Hey everybody, I want to share with you a really cool announcement. My name is Seth Perler, and I have an online summit called TEFOS, the Executive Function Online Summit for Compassionate and Proactive Parents, where we give you a bunch of knowledge, things to know, and a bunch of actions, things to do to support your child who might struggle with executive function. And Ekua Walker is one of our amazing speakers this year. It's an incredible summit at executivefunctionsummit.com. It's free, and you go to executivefunctionsummit.com, plop your email in. You can come the weekend for free, and really look forward to having you hear from all these amazing experts. Take care, everybody.
Well, and speaking of kind of like ethnic, takes on things, why don't you tell us a little bit about, your approach with your family's ethnic makeup, the diverse backgrounds that you and your husband have, and then, how you're talking to your children about race and empathy.
So I feel these days it's so different from when we were growing up. I think the schools do a really, some schools, their school does a very good job of bringing that into their daily lives at school. They have group meetings and different, ethnic makeups that they can join their own or even others and talk about race and culture. In fact, they teach me so much about other cultures. Like they are so aware of the world now. And it's really lovely to see that. How things have really changed in that respect. And for us, from when they were young, I never even really had to talk so much about it because we were fortunate enough to visit our countries, Jamaica and India. My husband grew up in Africa, which we still haven't visited, but I would love to. And
Yes,
so
Nigeria, right?
yes, in Nigeria. But they have been able to learn by experience, by seeing and being, when we go to Jamaica, we're not staying in a hotel or removed from the real, experience of Jamaica. We are embracing it because we're in my parents' home. And, they are part of that culture now. So they really get immersed in it. And, we eat the local foods. We're not eating the sort of, Americanized versions of those foods. We love ackee, it's so good, and dumplings, and all those delicious meals. So, and then in India, it's the same. We'll try the street food because it's so good, and really go, because we have my husband's family there. They take us to the local places that are popular,
right, that they love.
Yes, and so I think they've experienced it just by visiting it.
Right. And yeah, that's a good reminder that, when you are traveling, if you can step outside of the bubble of where you're going, if it's like a resort or a hotel where it's, safe and available to venture into, some of the more local areas. You might have to work a little harder to find that opportunity or get to that restaurant that's off the beaten path, but it may very well be worth it for, like you said, the lived experience of the culture that you get to share with your family.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's been very organic, I think, for them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And if you're not traveling, then you can try some of these foods, right in your own home, right? And infuse some of those flavors and use that as a little quick mini trip.
Yes. And one other thing I did do as when they were little is I read books to them from many different cultures. I really made an effort to get a variety. And so they were exposed through that, because little children, they get absorbed in what you read them.
Right. Yes. We love talking about books and sharing books here as well. So that's a nice springboard.
We still talk about the books they read. Like they're so memorable. We still remember. And I also, they were exposed to Spanish very young. So they speak Spanish, and they, were read books in Spanish all the time. And we sit and remember, we say the words together because we still remember. And another thing that's huge for my kids is music. We are a very musical family. And I think that was instilled from when they were little, and there's still songs from when they were little that suddenly will start singing, like La Cucaracha, or, it's like so fun. So I think there's a lot of memories from that age, and it's important to expose them at that age.
Absolutely. And like you said, they're sponges, especially when they're young, for a lot of that. And it sounds like even as teenagers, they're not, they haven't forgotten it. It's still in them, and it still brings, the smiles and the fun.
Yes.
So great. Well, Nisha, I see you as a mom changing the world, using your voice as a nutritionist, as a vegan cookbook author, and a vegan blogger. Can you give us, a few tips for how you're kind of creating balance and finding joy in all that you are juggling?
So balance, I'm still working on. Well, I think when my kids were growing up, my whole existence was sort of being a mom to them. I was fortunate enough to be home, and it was imbalanced in that everything was about them. Now that they're older, I have definitely experimenting with being a working mom from home and giving to them. And it's, some days it's a good balance. Some days I don't feel I did it well. And I, have to think, okay, tomorrow, how do I do that better? So I think it's a work in progress. I try to do at home now. This is one other good thing about, the Zoom thing is I do live yoga classes. I'm part of the Iyengar Institute, which is the original yoga. And I do, I really enjoy taking that time at home when they're in school and doing a class, live class, and sipping my green tea, which you're not supposed to see. That's the advantage of doing it on Zoom. You can't do that in the studio. I'd get into trouble.
Yes, we have grace.
Yes.
At
so,
home.
I try to incorporate those things too, for my mental health,
Right.
But it is like my own business now. So it does consume a lot of my time. But it's a work in balance. And I think an important thing, which I fail sometimes, is our self-talk as parents. I'm hard on myself. We criticize ourselves a lot, or we see the negatives of what we do. And I think it's important, and for myself too, to remember to see all the positives we're doing. We're trying our best, and not to have that negative self-talk, because our kids can see it too, I think.
They can. Yes. And the way we talk to ourselves, as you mentioned, that self-talk is so, it's so automatic, and we sometimes don't even catch ourselves doing it, but growing in awareness of the fact that we need to have just as much grace for ourselves as we have for our kids and our friends and the people around us is a process. It's a journey to really listen in and kind of tune in to the self-talk that may not be serving us well and is often very critical and can be even harsh, and shifting that to, like you said, being much more compassionate and having a lot more grace.
I actually, when my kids were little, I was very into meditating and Buddhism. My husband is a Buddhist, actually. So I took them every summer to family Buddhist camp. And it was like meditating, but appropriate for children. Yeah. Right, not like you sit down and you meditate.
Right, for 3 hours.
Yes, exactly. We had to do that, not them. It was more of a camp situation. For them. And I think that has been hugely impactful on their lives. My husband meditates almost daily, and I used to for many years, but once I started this business, I kind of, it fell off the wagon. Is it on the wagon, off the wagon? I can't remember. But he has really made an effort to keep that as part of their lives. And while the younger two may not do it often, even just talking about it or bringing it to their awareness, I think it's like my eldest will tell you that has been a huge impact on her life, because she actually did it a lot with him.
Yes, and we talk about mindful, based strategies a lot here. And my whole Be Calm system is built on a kind of a foundation of that mindful awareness of being present with our children and being available to them in the ways that they need us to be, especially as the heated moments kick in. And so that's a beautiful reminder. Again, starting young, early, often, consistent modeling, right? Doing it for them, or doing it because we're doing it for ourselves, but they get to see, and we're inviting and including them as, as they're able and willing and wanting to do that.
And I think actually it translates very well into food and eating. Mindful eating is so important, to not overeating, to enjoying your food, to paying attention to your food. It's a mindfulness practice in itself. And I think when possible, eating as a family together is so powerful. And it's been studied how impactful that is on the mental health of kids. And I've made an effort to do that from when they were little. Even if my husband couldn't make it every time home, he tries, I would do it with them and sit with them. And I think it's a very positive reinforcement and message around food. And when I eat at home alone in the days, because I work from home, I put all my cell phones away, my computers away, and I really just eat and sit and be mindful with that food. And even cooking is a mindfulness practice. So, and if you think of it like that and being present with your cooking, you will really start to enjoy it more.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. I love that, this whole season we've been talking more about neurodiversity and, sensory experiences and sensory processing can be a part of what some of our children and our families are contending with. And especially as you mentioned around food, food is such a sensory experience, right? You're looking, you're smelling, you're tasting, and it's bringing so many of those things together. And for some of our children, it can be a very tough thing for them if they're overwhelmed by the flavors or the smells or all of those different things, because the brain is just struggling to connect and interpret, the pleasure that they might, get out of something versus the displeasure or dissatisfaction. So thank you for that reminder that we all can be more mindful and present when we eat by ourselves with our families, because it does impact our experience.
Yes, definitely. And I think there's so much sensory overload in the world today that we just forget the simple things like food. and eating,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly. And food as that first, medicine, that first fuel, as our, proverb was reminding us. And it's kind of that foundational place that we need to survive. And yet, as you mentioned, distractions can pull us away so easily. So
Yes.
good. Well, as we close, the word of the year is overflow and abundance. And so I'm closing and asking many of our guests what that word means for them in this year.
So for me, I think what I thought a lot about during COVID and, is sort of going back to basics, because I get overwhelmed by overflow. I struggle with, I get anxiety when things are so big or there's so many people, or you go to a mall, or, I tend to be more simple in that respect. I don't need to buy a lot of clothes. I don't need the most fancy furniture. Like all of that stuff for me it's not going to make me happy. The overflow, the abundance. I think actually simplicity makes me happy.
Yeah.
Just basic things, like a few basic items and that you need,
Sure.
and you can really enjoy those.
Sure. To the abundance, right? To the full.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Find
Yeah.
abundance in the simplicity. How's that?
Yes, I love that. That's a great take on the fact that we can sometimes overcomplicate our lives, overcomplicate things. And one of the things I too am trying to hold on to was the simplicity, the paring down of things that was kind of forced on us in the pandemic. And so I love thinking about that. And I'll definitely have to think more about simplifying to find abundance in the simple things and the basic
Yes,
things.
I like that.
Yeah.
And, if you even think back to our children when they were very little, they were so simple,
Right,
like they
right.
weren't like, it wasn't complicated for them
To
yet.
make them happy or to have
Yeah.
fun with them. Absolutely. And so if
Kids
we can,
just see the very base, they are simple in that sense.
yes, yeah, that's awesome. And for me, in relation to food, I sometimes will picture or, just come to mind recently, just the idea of like abundant produce or just fresh, gardens like full of, bursting, tomatoes or a lemon tree that's full of lemons. And so I think, and so I love just visualizing abundance in plants and food and in that way, right? Just coming up from the earth in a garden, on a hillside, in a store. And it we're so thankful and so blessed that we have access to, that we drive down in California, not the cornfields, but like the fields, right? The almond
Right.
groves, the avocados, like to me, I picture that, and that just makes me happy to think about food in that way, that it's grown in abundance, more than enough for us, and we're sharing it really with the world from California as well. And so it's really, in many ways, a privilege and an honor, right, to be so close to and have such access to more than enough food
Yes.
that we can share.
And I think going back to your original proverb is like that nature provides abundance. We don't have to purchase material things for abundance. We can just walk and observe nature and be present, and we will see abundance there and beautiful in a beautiful way.
All around us. That's right. If we take the time to notice it.
Yes.
Nice. Great, Nisha. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. How can people find you and follow you?
So I am on Instagram at Cooking for Peanuts, cooking for kids or cooking for no money at that time. And I have a blog where all the recipes are printable, and I talk a bit more about myself, and that's cookingforpeanuts.com. And you can also link to purchase my book on the homepage there.
Nice.
And the book is also practically vegan, available, if you even Google that, I'm sure it will come up, but it's available on Amazon, it's available in Barnes and Nobles, it's available on the Penguin Random House website, and it's available in a lot of independent stores around the country. And if you have a local bookstore, you can go in and ask them to, if they have it, or to even order it for you, which is great because it increases awareness of the book, and they will be able to do that. So
for you. Oh, that's lovely. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for yet another interview. So excited to be able to connect with you and support you further if you'd like. I work with engaged parents who are ready to turn behavior challenges into opportunities by being calm and present in the moment with your child. And so you can begin that process by attending my free webinar at becalmparenting.com. And then you'll see the link to register to attend that webinar and be able to connect for a strategy session to see if working together can support you in any way in your parenting journey. So may you be full of abundance and overflow as you press forward with your day and continue to change the world, one child at a time, one day at a time. I'm here with Seth Perler, and I'm excited to be a part of his next summit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Seth Perler. Yeah, and the summit is called TEFOS, or the Executive Function Online Summit. Or executivefunctionsummit.com. Executivefunctionsummit.com is where you find it. So for all of you listening here, Ekua, first of all, is going to be one of our amazing speakers. We just did our recording today, and we're going to be talking about strategies, be calm strategies, mindfulness strategies to help your child with executive function. But this summit is something that I created for parents specifically. We have a lot of teachers and therapists who come, but really for parents who are concerned about their child with this thing called executive function, Ekua. And executive function is this concept that is a little bit abstract, but it's not as complicated as it seems. Basically, if your child is struggling with school, struggling with getting important things done, attention, concentration, focus, priorities, planning, organization, their grades, getting homework done, getting out of the door in the morning, all of these things require that the brain be able to execute these tasks. The brain is helping us do that. And with what you do with mindfulness, it's so important for the brain to be able to function well, to attend well. And so that's what this is all about: how parents, teachers, therapists can get strategies, knowledge, and basically two things: knowledge and action. What do people need to know? And what can people do to support their child who's struggling and who they really want to see shine in this world? And you have attended before.
I have.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. It was the first of its kind that I attended, and I really appreciated all the speakers. I think this year you'll have about 30 or so speakers who'll be a part of it. I got something out of every session that I attended, and it's exciting that we have this as a forum for really all parents, I think, can benefit and gain something from TEFOS.
And you are one of our people, so so good.
Yes.
So go to executivefunctionsummit.com, executivefunctionsummit.com. You plop your email in there, and it's free for the weekend. You can buy the all access pass if you want, but it is completely 100% free for the weekend. Dive in. There's just so much great content. Take a weekend to really nurture yourself and just learn.
Yes, if you come at this in lifetime, it's August 5th through 8th, 2022, but you'll have access to it, and I'll have the link in my description so that it's easy for you to join in. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Moms Changing the World with host Ekua Walker. The information shared on this show is meant for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitute for medical intervention or professional therapy. All views shared on the show are that of the speakers only and do not represent any institution. To be a part of the community, visit www.momschangingtheworld.org. There you'll find ways to connect with and support the moms we interview and find out how to work with Ekua as a parenting coach. Join us next time for more encouragement and support to be a mom changing the world, one child at a time. one day at a time.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review.
Thanks for listening.